The histories of mixed martial arts and professional wrestling have pretty much always been intertwined. One of the first MMA promotions, Pancrase, was founded by pro wrestlers Masakatsu Funaki and Minoru Suzuki, and guys like Brock Lesnar, Ken Shamrock, and Dan Severn have managed to bridge the gap between the two worlds, competing and excelling in both sports. While the people on this list may be less notable in the MMA world, the fact that they were able to compete in both pro wrestling and mixed martial arts is a feat in itself. So without further ado, here is 8 wrestlers you didn't know fought in MMA. Number 1, Jushin Liger. Seeing as Jushin Liger is one of the most legendary active wrestlers today, his short-lived MMA career comes as a surprise to most. His first and only fight was against Minoru Suzuki in 2002, which, of course, means Liger made his MMA debut at the ripe old age of 38. Pancrase founder Minoru Suzuki was coming to the end of the road of his MMA career in 2002. Having nearly 50 fights in just 9 years had, unsurprisingly, taken its toll on his body, so he was given a sacrificial lamb of sorts in Jushin Liger. Liger was never supposed to be an actual test for Suzuki, just a famous opponent for Suzuki to run through on his way to retirement. The fight itself was nothing to write home about, but instead was a tribute to the dominance Suzuki had displayed throughout his career. Number 2, Schinsky Nakamura. Schinsky Nakamura might have had the most MMA potential out of the people on this list. While his career was short-lived, the King of Strong Style compiled an impressive record of 3 wins, 1 loss, and 1 no contest in his 5 fights, with his only loss coming to a member of the legendary Gracie clan, a young Daniel Gracie. In fact, Shinsuke made enough of an impression for the UFC to offer him a contract in 2005, but fortunately for wrestling fans, Shinsuke decided to stick with New Japan. Number 3, Dr. Death Steve Williams. Coincidentally enough, the only fight of Dr. Death's MMA career came against the same man who faced Shinsuke in his last 2 fights. Alexei Ignashov was seemingly K1's designated matchup for pro wrestlers. Even with that, Ignashov is a legitimate kickboxing star and was able to easily handle the aging wrestler in just 22 seconds. After his quick defeat, Steve Williams quietly retired from MMA and returned to the independent circuit. Number 4, Alberto Del Rio, a name we haven't heard a lot from in professional wrestling in quite a while, but the former WWE champion is an oddity on this list, primarily for having an MMA career that lasted almost 10 years. In Del Rio's 14 pro fights, the Pride of Mexico went 9-5. Despite his record, Del Rio's MMA ability can be called into question when looking at the people he beat. Out of the 9 wins on Del Rio's record, 3 were against fighters with no prior fights, and 4 were against fighters with losing records. His biggest fight came against a young Mirko Cro Cop, which he lost by knockout in just 46 seconds. Despite the questionable nature of his career, his legacy still stands in the MMA community as the guy who wore a mask in his fights, as obviously he was wrestling in Mexico at that time and wasn't going to take off his mask for anybody, much less an MMA fighter. Next up is Sean OHair. OHair's short WWE run as the Devil's Advocate is often looked back upon as a big missed opportunity by the creative team. After being released by WWE in 2004, OHair had a brief stint in New Japan and on the independents before retiring from professional wrestling altogether in 2006. Prior to retiring in wrestling, OHair had been competing in various kickboxing and MMA events heading into 2006 with a professional record of 2-1. His 4th fight came against Eric Esch, better known as Butterbean, at Pride 32. Esch was originally supposed to face Mark Hunt, but the Nevada State Athletic Commission blocked the fight, citing Hunt's significant mat advantage. OHair lasted only 29 seconds against Butterbean, with the match being called off after OHair took 1 too many shots to the head while going for a takedown. OHair fought twice more professionally, winning both by way of first-round knockouts. It's also noted that Sean OHair had quite a few MMA bouts in smaller amateur fights, but those have not been recorded on his Sherdog record, which is really all I've taken into account for this episode. At number 6, we have Bam Bigelow. In 1996, Bam Bam was arguably at the height of his career. Right before his legendary ECW run, Bigelow saw dollar signs in the octagon and decided to throw his hat in the ring. His one and only fight was against early MMA pioneer Kimo Leopoldo. The fight itself was a brutal display of Bigelow's lack of ability. the big man was taken down immediately and failed to defend himself against a barrage of punches by Leopoldo. The fight ended just 2 minutes after it started, as Bam Bam was unable to get any offense in before tapping out to a rear naked choke. It's safe to say Bam Bam regretted his choice to get into MMA, as he would never fight again. At number 7, we have Zim Salman II. Now known as Rezar, one half of the Authors of Pain, Salmani was introduced to martial arts from a very young age, practicing judo from the age of 4, kickboxing from the age of 12, and MMA from age 15. Salmani went 2-0 in his 2 amateur fights, managing to finish both. He continued his winning ways in the first pro fight of his career, but lost his second. After suffering his first loss at FFC 5, Salmani went on another streak, finishing his next 3 fights within 2 minutes, and establishing himself as a brutal submission artist. At Bellator 130, he was given his first national television exposure. Unfortunately, Salmani would lose by way of TKO to Daniel Gallimore, but shortly thereafter signed a developmental deal with WWE, so you can't really feel too bad for the guy. Last, and potentially even least, we have Nathan Jones. Most of you have probably forgotten about the Australian big man and his short-lived WWE run, but watching him in the wrestling ring would certainly not give you any confidence for a potential MMA career. Despite this, Nathan Jones has in fact competed in MMA, although I doubt anyone actually saw him as competition. Jones actually tried to get into MMA before he even started wrestling, losing his only pro fight against sumo wrestler Koji Kitao in 1997. After his stint in pro wrestling, Jones decided to return to the octagon after a 10-year hiatus, losing to submission specialist Aaron Pyle in an amateur bout. Somehow, Nathan Jones's MMA career was even less notable than his wrestling career, although I would not say that to his face because he is still a powerlifting champion, and could quite frankly break me in half. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. It was based off an article I wrote for OutsideInterference.net back when that was alive, and I decided, hey, why should I let this rot in my Google Drive when I can turn it into a video that people might actually like to watch? So hopefully you did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Make sure to tell me what you want me to cover next, if it's a list, if it's an editorial. And I am, surprisingly, I know, quite the MMA and professional wrestling nerd, so I do enjoy doing the research for these videos. But again, hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, all that crap, and I'll see ya in the next one.
Heat in my vein like vernacular. Cook up the beat with a spatula. Y'all are not ready for action. I'm smoking these rappers and feeling spectacular. Making a killing like massacre. Watch out, I'm whipping my wrist. Right on my city, been pissed, but I show 'em love.